Okay, apart from the diversity of bats, we need to understand some aspects of their functional morphology. We've seen a lot of diversity in the specimens I've shown you so far, but you'll see a lot of diversity in their morphology as well. So I have a number of specimens pulled out here, and we're going to look at one aspect of their morphology that relates to their ecology. Now, for bats to be able to fly, they had to evolve a number of different features, and as we've discussed already, bats are the only mammals that have evolved true flight. Other types of mammals have learned how to glide, and very effectively at that, but bats are the only mammals that have evolved true flight, and that is through their exquisite wing and tail membranes. And the architecture of the wing is dependent on the changes to the forelimb structure, where the hand and wrist bones of other mammals, and also to the shape of the wing too, and the tail membrane as well, but especially the shape of the wing. And we're going to deal with one thing in particular here, and this is the aspect ratio. That is bluntly speaking, it is the ratio between the length versus the width of the wing, or the length versus the depth of the wing, whether the wing is long and narrow or short and fat, like whether it is like long thin wing, like you might have seen on certain types of fighter planes, or whether it is short and thick, like you might see on a crop duster like plane. And you could see how a high-flying jet plane can move very fast at high elevation and so on, but it's not going to be able to move very effectively at slow speeds in crop fields, whereas crop dusters and similar types of planes can move very effectively at those slow speeds with the types of wings that they have. You'll see the same sort of thing applies in the morphology of bat wings. There's another aspect of wing morphology as well, and that's to do with what's called the loading of the wings. The loading is the weight of the bat divided by the area of the wings, and the higher the relative wing loading values observed in bats which fly at higher velocities, the loading values were correlated with improved flight maneuverability. So additionally, the bats with low wing loading were able to carry bigger loads. So these would be bats that are carnivorous or feed on amphibians or fish or whatever. And you'll see how this ties into aspect ratio in a moment. I have the camera right now focused on a diagram that's in your textbook, that's also two diagrams that are in your lab manual, and there's similar diagrams in your textbook as well, which I want you to study about this topic of aspect ratio. And there are different ways that you can measure aspect ratio, and the one that I'm going to display with the bat species here, Lasiurus cinereus, the hoary bat, which we just looked at a moment ago. So this is a display mount specimen of a hoary bat. And the way we can measure it is you measure the length of the radius here. That's from there to there. That's the radius bone. and you measure the distance from the wrist. This is the wrist because this is the thumb bone here, this is the hallux. And you measure the distance from there to the end of the third digit. This is the end of the third digit here. The second digit is out here. This is the fourth digit, and this is the fifth digit. So you measure this distance, and you add the two together. So that gives you the length. And then you divide it by the distance from the wrist here to the end of the fifth digit. And that gives you a ratio for Lasiurus cinereus, the hoary bat. And you get an index, an aspect ratio of 2.5 for this species. That is the aspect ratio. That's a high aspect ratio for Lasiurus cinereus. Now let's look at another species. But remember what the morphology of the hoary bat looked like. The next one we're going to look at is the pallid bat, Anthrazoas pallidus. Now, right away you see that the Anthrazoas pallidus has a quote fatter wing. It's wider in this orientation and shorter here. So the ratio should be different in this case, and it is. It's quite different. The ratio turns out to be 2.02. So the aspect ratio is a lot lower. So this is a slower flying bat. This bat, the pallid bat can maneuver very effectively through a cluttered environment like woodland and trees and stuff like that, whereas the hoary bat, Lasiurus cinereus, moves very effectively at high speed above the trees and so on, and can capture high flying, fast moving insects. Now we're going to take a look at a few other species here. Sorry about that. Let's take a look at a few others. And we've got calculated aspect ratios here. Students in a previous version of the class worked out the aspect ratio for these specimens by doing it repeated times. So this is the Mexican free-tail bat. And its aspect ratio is 2.74, very high value. And this is the highest flyer of them all. So it's got a very high value. Okay. This silver-tip bat here, Lasionicterus. Again, look at those long relatively thin wings. What do you guess the value is for this one? Is it closer to 2 or closer to 2.5? 2.23. So again, that's a fast mover. Let's take a look at Eptesicus fuscus, the big brown bat. Remember we talked about this one earlier? Again, look at that, those wings, relatively long. Look at the value, 2.19. Those values are significantly higher than what you saw for Anthrazoas pallidus, which was right around 2.0. Now let's go take a look at Myotis. This is Myotis californicus. This is the California Myotis. This is not one that we looked at because we didn't have a regular study skin for this species, Myotis californicus. But if you look at its wings, you can see that they are pretty short and thick. So what would you say about its ecology? Okay, what would you think the index is for this one? Move the card. 2.08. Again, it's got a relatively low aspect ratio. Okay, this is Parastralis. Used to be Pippus. Again, we talked about this one earlier. I forgot to mention that its other common name is the canyon bat. And move the card for this one. And again, it's just like Myotis californicus. It's 2.07. And another Myotis here. This is Myotis Myotis volans, which we also looked at. And this one is the lowest of them all, 1.97. So you can see that the aspect ratio varies a great deal. These species here are these Myotis, the Parastralis, another Myotis, the Eptesicus. Well, not so much the Eptesicus, but all those can forage in much more cluttered environments than the high flyers. And of course, here's the star of the show here, the Mexican free-tailed bat. But Anthrazoa pallidus here is a very accomplished forager in cluttered environments too. So this is a topic I want you to study carefully. So that's the end of the videos for this lab. I will have one or two other items though.